How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, justice for A. Marie, what must be done for her? Now, this is about what we're looking for to make sure that justice happens for A. Marie and her family. Look at this little girl, guys. Again, beautiful little girl who has suffered a horrible act at the hands of three young kids, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, both boys, and a 10-year-old girl. This story is one of the toughest stories I had, and I'm not just covering, I've heard. A lot of people are saying it reminds them a lot of the James Bolger case, which I had a chance to review, and that's another one where you just don't expect such young kids to commit such gruesome acts, and the key is, can these kids be saved? Now, guys, I've done a series of videos on this, but I would definitely recommend that you check the other videos so you can see exactly the details behind this, what happened to her. I mean, we covered in detail based on what the mother put on her Facebook profile page, but then I wanted to have a sit down with a mental health counselor, which we did as well. If you guys get a chance, I would highly recommend you watch that video, because we cover a lot. I mean, we're learning in the process as well. It's not, we're not here, we're not experts. We're learning it as we go. But I had her on. Her name was Denise Schoenwald. She is a mental health counselor. And if you guys get a chance, I'll show you. This is it's a long one. It's about an hour and change, but it covers a lot. And what it does, it tries to showcase different perspectives. And this is the video, if you guys ever get a chance. I posted it on my community board. You could see it. But if you go just a few days back, it's actually an hour, 41 minutes. But the cover looks like this. It was published on October 14, 2025. That's the cover. We have a big deep dive into just the craziness of how this could happen. But I want to talk about what justice could look like for A. Marie Jones, because this is really all about her and her family. And you could see sometimes through the comments that you get some conflict. You get most of them is going to be about these kids need to get locked up. The 10-year-old, the 9-year-old, and even the 8-year-old. And at this point, we've heard that the 10-year-old, the girl, and the 9-year-old have been charged, and they've been charged with some high-level charges. But now the question is, what happens in the juvenile justice system? That's the concern. And then you get some who show pity for the young kids, which is tough to understand, but still a perspective. And again, not to minimize, but it's the perspective. They're young kids, so they're going to go and say, well, what about the parents? What's going on in those homes? So justice, I know how I would see it, which is probably as most would see it. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to put something out there that encompasses all the different perspectives. So at the end of the day, when we're all looking for justice, we know that this is for A. Marie. This is for her and her family. And at the end of the day, the best people that can truly determine what justice is, what justice needs to be for A. Marie is A. Marie and her family. That's the key. I don't care if it's us. I don't care if it's the criminal justice system, because to be honest with you, as you do these cases and you watch true crime and you're trying to report on it, and I being involved in the criminal justice system, sometimes I do feel that the victim is not heard, and that really is all about the person doing the crime. I feel there's more measures to protect their rights than there is to protect the victims. But with that said, I put something together that I think tries its best to balance it out, because in the end, if we stand on extremes, then nothing happens. But if we find a middle ground, stuff that we can agree on, and as long as it's anchored by what's best for the family, what they want, then we move forward united. And petitions like this that we got, that's over 50,000, it's over right now the needed amount. change can happen with little conflict. And guys, and you guys have been signing the petition. That's great. If you look at one of the videos, I linked the petition to the video. But if you guys want to know how to get to the petition, actually, I have it here. You can even search it. But if you put change.org, and it's Change Ohio Juvenile Justice Loopholes for Young Offenders petition. There it is. And guys, by the way, as I said, it's already over 50,000. So we rocked it. So today we face one of the hardest questions a community can ever ask. What does justice look like for a 5-year-old victim, Amory Jones, when the suspects are children themselves? Because that seems to be where the debate is. I mean, justice to me is justice. But obviously, where the conflict is the age of these children, 10, 9, and 8. Again, this is not to minimize, but it's being put out there. So the case is not just about the law. It's about humanity, morality, and how we define justice when innocence collides with brutality. So let's begin where all conversations must begin. So let's begin with Amory. This is the heart of everything we're discussing today. This little girl will carry scars long after the courtroom doors close. Her body, her spirit, her sense of safety, all of it has been stolen and scarred at an age where she should have been dreaming about kindergarten, cartoons, and playground games. Instead, she faces a lifetime of trauma because of an act that no child should ever endure. So justice for Amory must begin and end with accountability. Must begin and end with accountability. Healing is not possible without it, because when accountability is missing, closure is impossible. And when closure is impossible, the wounds never close. Too often, victims and their families are overshadowed in these discussions. We debate what the offender deserves while the victim's suffering fades into the background. And that's something that her mom did not want. And when she wasn't getting responses, she put this information out there because she didn't want what happened to her child to go unheard. But here we cannot allow Amory's suffering to fade into the background. This case must be anchored in Amory's rights, her dignity, and her healing. Accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about safety, trust, and respect. It's the system saying to Amory, to her mother, and to the community, your life matters, your pain matters, and what was done to you will not be dismissed. Now, someone asked me, can families ever feel justice is served? Now, here's a hard truth. The main suspects are only 9 and 10 years old. We have an 8-year-old, but we'll get to the 8-year-old. Children by age, but their actions, if proven, were violent, deliberate, and life-altering. Some will argue that children this young deserve rehabilitation, not punishment, and I've seen it on my page. But for Amory's family, rehabilitation alone will never feel like justice. Their daughter's trauma is permanent. Their pain has no end date. So the community is torn. Do we view the suspects as children who didn't know better, or as predators who must be held accountable regardless of their age? And this is not an easy scale to balance, but the anchor must always be the victim's family. Their voices should guide the path forward. If justice does not reflect the weight of their pain, then justice has failed. If justice does not reflect the weight of their pain, then justice has failed. And yet the law, now this is in Ohio, the law does have its limits. So in Ohio, children under 14 cannot be transferred to adult court. That means no matter how horrific the offense, the 9 and 10-year-olds will remain in the juvenile system. Prosecutors have done what they can, charging the children with attempted murder, rape, kidnapping, felonious assault, and strangulation. Those are the strongest charges available. Now, for the 8-year-old suspect, He was not charged. And at that age, the law presumes incompetency, that a child may not fully understand the consequences of their actions. And while that may be legally sound, to the public, it still feels incomplete. People see 3 children allegedly involved, but only 2 facing consequences. And that gap fuels frustration and raises doubt about fairness. So should there be exceptions? This case forces a larger debate. Should there be exceptions in the law when crimes are this extreme? If a child is capable of committing such brutal acts, should they be held to a higher level of accountability? Many families would say yes, because the crime demands it. Others argue that children must still be treated as children under the law, no matter the act. So there's no simple answer. But the debate itself matters. Without it, families like A. Marie will always feel the system stops short of true justice. So you got accountability versus rehabilitation, or maybe some shared partnership. So here's where the conflict is sharpest: accountability versus rehabilitation. At ages 9 and 10, the juvenile system will lean towards intervention, therapy, and education. Rehabilitation is the default. But here's the problem. If rehabilitation is the only outcome, it risks looking like a dismissal of A. Marie's suffering. True justice requires a mixture of both. Accountability ensures there are real, meaningful consequences that match the severity of the act. Rehabilitation ensures these children are redirected so that no other family endures this same nightmare. One without the other will always fall short. Rehabilitation without accountability disrespects the victim, and accountability without rehabilitation risks releasing unhealed, dangerous individuals back into society. So the challenge is balanced. But the system must never forget the first duty is to the victim. When I did the show with Denise Schoenwald, we even said, do you know when a child can't be saved, can't be turned around? And we discussed that. Because that's the case for many, that it's just too late. They're too damaged. And you have to be willing to admit that. Because a lot of times success is literally measured by success when it shouldn't be. Success could also be measured by someone knowing that this person can't be saved and doing the right thing to make sure that they don't have the chance to hurt others. I want to talk about the role of parents because, again, if you can't hold, there was one point where if you can't hold the children accountable to that level that they need to be held accountable to, where do you go next? And that's where the arguments start pushing towards the family, because acts like this, they have to have learned, had to have been modeled. So you definitely have to look at the home. You definitely have to look at what type of living conditions are these children under. So we also cannot ignore the parents of these suspects. Children do not grow up in isolation. Behaviors, even violent ones, are often learned, modeled, or tolerated at home. So the community is right to ask, where were these parents? What influence shaped these children? Was there neglect, abuse, exposure to violence, exposure to pornography? If a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old are capable of such atrocities, then the home must be examined. Sometimes accountability must extend beyond the children to the adults who fail to guide, protect, or intervene. Child services may need to step in. Investigations must be made, because when children this young commit horrors, the family environment cannot be ignored. So what's the community impact? So this case also sends a chilling reminder to every parent in Cleveland. Danger doesn't just come from adults. It can come from other children. And that reality forces us to redefine safety. Parents must now ask harder questions. Who are my children spending time with? What influences are shaping them? Who is supervising? What are they being exposed to in the home, at school, or online? I mean, yes, every kid has a separate screen, but at the age of 10, you can't say, well, I don't know what they're watching. Well, if you don't, take it away. They're 10, they're 9, they're 8. You could take it away. So you don't have an excuse. Neighborhoods, schools, and families must all work together to identify risk earlier. Because when kids become the source of violence, prevention becomes even more urgent. Now, guys, people have asked me about race. A lot of people want to know what the race of the children are. And I get it in today's times. I get the context of why a question like that may be posed. But I want to bring something to this and just take it for what it is. Now, let's address an angle people in the community are quietly talking about: race. The race of the suspects has not been released, but some are asking, what if it had been 3 white children? Would prosecutors consider hate crime charges if the victims were of another race? And what if it had been 3 black children? Would the response look different with more scrutiny, harsher judgment, or a different public narrative? And these are not accusations, but they reflect a broader truth. In America, people don't always believe justice is colorblind. Race often shapes perception. The respectful way to frame this is simple, at least to me. No matter the race, what happened to A. Marie is horrendous. Accountability must not depend on skin color. Justice must not shift depending on who the suspects are. But the fact that people are even asking these questions shows something deeper: a lack of faith in the fairness of the system. That's a conflict society must continue to wrestle with. So I don't have the answer. But at the end of the day, look at this. Scalped, beaten, sexually abused. Justice. It's a horrendous act, what happened to her. And A. Marie needs justice. Her family needs justice. So the broader reflection is, so how do we measure justice here? Punishment, prevention, and healing. All 3 are necessary. Punishment respects the victim and recognizes the severity of the act. Prevention ensures no other child suffers the way A. Marie has. And healing allows the family and maybe even the community to move forward. But real justice also requires us to look beyond the courtroom. It requires schools, child services, parents, and communities to act earlier, to identify red flags and intervene before tragedy strikes. And yes, it may require lawmakers to ask, are the current laws strong enough to address crimes of this severity, even when the suspects are children? So justice for A. Marie isn't about politics, race, or excuses. It's about ensuring this little girl, whose life was shattered at just 5 years old, receives the dignity of accountability, the protection of prevention, and the hope of healing. And I'm going to say that again, because that's what this is about. It's about assuring this little girl, whose life was shattered at just 5 years old, receives the dignity of accountability, the protection of prevention, and the hope of healing. That means holding the suspects responsible, examining the role of their parents, and refusing to allow her suffering to be minimized. Real justice honors A. Marie, protects other children, and demands that we, as families, as a community, and as a system, do better moving forward. Justice for A. Marie starts now. As always, guys, show us Tear Talk. Stay safe.